Good morning. Welcome to Nora Unitarian Universalist Church. Welcome to the Parsonage Study. It's good to know that many of you are joining us today from the safety of your homes or wherever you may be. Now that we have moved out of the church for the time being, pledges may be mailed to the church address. Brooke will be in at least once each week and make deposits. The chalice lighting words today are from Anne Rice and the benediction from Barrow Dunham. Each time we gather to worship, a new body is created. Never before has this same congregation come together, and never again. The weekly recreation of this worshiping community brings the possibility of new consciousness, even now in this unfamiliar way. This is indeed a sacred event. Come, let us worship together. Did the Bluetooth go off?
Mm-mm.
One tiny flame could make so many other flames. One tiny flame could set afire a whole world. Our song this morning, I Have Decided, is written and performed by Dave Rowe, based on a quote from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear.
Decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. I
Joy and woe are woven fine, wrote William Blake. And when this we rightly know, safely through the world we go. Because we daily live the truth in the poet's words, we pause each week to place our joys and sorrows into the loving container of this faith community. You may type your joys or sorrows into the chat so that others may hold them in your hearts. Next week, you can send them to me, text or email or Facebook Messenger, and I will speak them aloud. Christine Paulson wrote last night that she's 80 years old today, a candle of joy for Christine. She and her family will be partying together on Zoom. She has the age, she's sure the wisdom will come shortly. Happy birthday to me, she says. I am one fortunate being. Today, November 15th, is the day that is observed as the death of Francis David, who died in prison, having started the Unitarian Church more or less in Transylvania when he debated at Torda. So we hold him and all that grew out of him in our hearts as well. And of course, all that remains unspoken. Let us hold all of our joys and our sorrows in our hearts as we enter a spirit of meditation. The words of meditation this morning from Patrick Otuoma. And I said to him, "Are there questions to all of this?" And he said, "The answer is in a story, and the story is being told." And I said, "But there is so much pain." And she answered plainly, "Pain will happen." Then I said, "Will I ever find meaning?" And they said, "You will find meaning where you give meaning." The answer is in the story, and the story isn't finished. Amen. was Improvisation on Djembe by Matt Meyer. Our reading this morning is a slightly abridged version of The Last Leaf, a short story by O. Henry. Sue and John Z. lived at the top of a building with 3 floors. One of these young women came from Maine, the other from California. Toward winter, a cold stranger entered Greenwich Village. No one could see him. He walked around, touching one person here and another there with his icy fingers. He was a bad sickness. Doctors called him pneumonia. On the east side of the city, he hurried, touching many people, but in the narrow streets of Greenwich Village, he did not move so quickly. Mr. Pneumonia was not a nice old gentleman. A nice old gentleman would not hurt a weak little woman from California. But Mr. Pneumonia touched Johnsy with his cold fingers. She lay on her bed almost without moving, and she looked through the window at the wall of the house next to hers. One morning, the busy doctor spoke to Sue alone in the hall, where Johnsy could not hear. "She has a very small chance," he said. "She has a chance if she wants to live. If people don't want to live, I can't do much for them. Your little friend has decided that she is not going to get well. Is there something that is troubling her?" "She always wanted to go to Italy and paint a picture of the Bay of Naples," said Sue. "Paint? Not paint. Is there anything worth being troubled about? A man?" "A man?" said Sue. "Is a man worth—" "No, doctor, there is not a man." Said the doctor, "I will do all I know how to do, but when a sick person begins to feel that she's going to die, half my work is useless. Talk to her about new winter clothes. If she were interested in the future, her chances would be better." After the doctor had gone, Sue went into the workroom to cry. Then she walked into Johnsy's room. She carried some of her painting materials, and she was singing. Johnsy lay there very thin and very quiet. Her face was turned toward the window. Sue stopped singing, thinking Johnsy was asleep. Sue began to work. As she worked, she heard a low sound again and again. She went quickly to the bedside. Johnsy's eyes were open wide. She was looking out the window and counting back. 12, she said, and a little later 11, and then 10, and 9, and then 8 and 7 almost together. Sue looked out the window. What was there to count? There was only the side wall of the next house, a short distance away. The wall had no window. An old tree grew against the wall. The cold breath of winter had already touched it. Almost all its leaves had fallen from its dark branches. "What is it, dear?" asked Sue. 6, said Johnsy in a voice still lower. "They're falling faster now. 3 days ago there were almost 100. It hurt my head to count them. But now it's easy. There goes another. There are only 5 now." "5 what, dear? Tell your Sue." "Leaves on the tree. When the last one falls, I must go too. I've known that for 3 days. Didn't the doctor tell you?" "Oh, I never heard of such a thing," said Sue. "It doesn't have any sense in it. What does an old tree have to do with you, or with your getting well? And you used to love that tree so much." "Don't be a fool. The doctor told me your chances for getting well. He told me this morning. He said you have very good chances. Try to eat a little now, and I'll go back to my work. And then I can sell my picture, and then I can buy something more for you to eat to make you strong." "You don't have to buy anything for me," said Johnsy. She looked out at the window. "There goes another. No, I don't want anything to eat. Now there are 4. I want to see the last one fall before night. Then I'll go too." Johnsy closed her eyes and lay white and still. I want to see that last leaf fall. I have done enough waiting. I have done enough thinking. I want to go sailing down, down, like one of those leaves. Try to sleep, said Sue. I must call Behrman to come up here. I want to paint a man in this picture, and I'll make him look like Behrman. I won't be gone a minute. Don't try to move until I come back. Old Behrman was a painter who lived on the first floor of their house. He was past 60. He had had no success as a painter. For 40 years he had painted without ever painting a good picture. He had always talked about painting a great picture, a masterpiece, but he had never yet started it. He got a little money by letting others paint pictures of him. He drank too much. He still talked of his great masterpiece, and he believed that it was his special duty to do everything possible to help Sue and Johnsy. Sue found him in his dark room, and she knew he had been drinking. She could smell it. She told him about Johnsy and the leaves on the vine. She said that she was afraid that Johnsy would indeed sail down, down like the leaf. Her hold on the world was growing weaker. Old Behrman shouted his anger over such an idea. What, he cried, are there such fools? Do people die because leaves drop off a tree? I have not heard of such a thing. Go, I come with you. This is not any place for someone so good as Johnsy to lie sick. Some day I shall paint my masterpiece, and we shall all go away from here. Johnsy was sleeping when they went up. Sue covered the window and took Behrman into the other room. There they looked out the window fearfully at the tree. Then they looked at each other for a moment without speaking. A cold rain was falling, with a little snow in it, too. Behrman sat down and Sue began to paint. She worked through most of the night. In the morning, after an hour's sleep, she went to Johnsy's bedside. Johnsy, with wide open eyes, was looking toward the window. I want to see. Sue took the cover from the window. But after the beating rain and the wild wind that had not stopped through the whole night, there was still one leaf to be seen against the wall. It was the last on the tree. It was still dark green near the branch, but at the edges it was turning yellow with age. There it was, hanging from a branch nearly 20 feet above the ground. It is the last one, said Johnsy. I thought it would surely fall during the night. I heard the wind. It will fall today, and I shall die at the same time. The day slowly passed. As it grew dark, they could still see the leaf hanging from its branch against the wall. And then, as night came, the north wind began again to blow. The rain still beat against the windows. When it was light enough to see the next morning, Johnsy again commanded that she be allowed to see. The leaf was still there. Johnsy lay for a long time looking at it, and then she called to Sue, who was cooking something for her to eat. Johnsy said, "Something has made that last leaf stay there to show me it was wrong to want to die. I'll try to eat now. But first bring me a looking glass so that I can see myself, and then I'll sit up and watch you cook." An hour later she said, "Sue, someday I hope to paint the Bay of Naples." The doctor came in the afternoon. Sue followed him into the hall outside to talk to him. "The chances are good," the doctor said. He took Sue's thin, shaking hand in his. "Give her good care and she'll get well. And now I must see another sick person in this house. His name is Behrman, a painter, I believe. Pneumonia, too. He is very ill. There is no hope for him. But we take him to the hospital today. We'll make it as easy for him as we can." The next day, the doctor said to Sue, "She's safe. You've done it. Food and care now, that's all." And that afternoon, Sue came to the bed where Johnsy lay. She put one arm around her. "I have something to tell you," she said. "Mr. Behrman died of pneumonia today in the hospital. He was ill only 2 days. Someone found him on the morning of the first day in his room. He was helpless with pain. His shoes and his clothes were wet and cold as ice. Everyone wondered where he had been. That night had been so cold and wild. And then they found some things. There was a light that he had taken outside, and there were his materials for painting. There was paint, green paint, and yellow paint. And look out the window, dear, at the last leaf on the wall. Didn't you wonder why it never moved when the wind was blowing? Oh, my dear, it is Behrman's great masterpiece. He painted it there the night the last leaf fell. Here ends the reading. Our hymn to Mercy, Pity, Peace, and Love, words by William Blake, music by Nicholas Herman, with harmony by J.S. Bach. Sally Hanson plays the piano. And to the human form divine, all pray in their distress. This was meant to be a tirade. I meant to stand here raging against people who won't wear masks or maintain social distance, who have accepted and further perpetuate the lie that COVID-19 is not a deadly disease and that public health measures are an assault on freedom. I meant to use all my verbal skills to say cuttingly, none of us is being asked to go out into the cold and wet to endanger our lives that another might live or at least cease to want to die. Just get on about being a decent human being. There are two problems, at least, with what I intended to do here this morning. First, some among us are being asked to endanger their lives that others might live. And second, I'm tired of being outraged. I've been mentioning essential workers, those putting their lives on the line, often without adequate protective equipment, in nearly every sermon or prayer or meditation since March. One of these weeks I'll give them a whole service. They deserve that and more. Today I'll talk about being tired of being outraged and what it means to be weary of outrage when there is still so much to be outraged at, outraged over, outraged about. And why it is important to both let go of and hang on to the outrage. And maybe how we can thread that both and needle. I don't think I'm telling you anything new if I say that outrage is exhausting. All those passionate arguments, some of them with real people in real time, many of them in our heads with real people who aren't in the room or with whole groups of people we see in the media. All the marshaling of resources and anecdotes and data points. All the nagging sensations of shame and inadequacy that often lurk underneath the righteous indignation, making outrage twice the labor it already is. All of what makes outrage outrage, stoked so often and burning for so long, it is exhausting. I want to advise letting it go, to suggest that we take an extended break from consuming media that fuels our outrage, that we practice interrupting ourselves when we start ramping up our internal or public tirades, that we breathe more deeply, slowly, than we often have been of late. None of this is bad advice. Yet don't we still need outrage? Doesn't our country, our environment, each of our several communities, however we define them, need us to be outraged on their behalf, our behalf? Outraged especially because it's all the same familiar stuff we need to be outraged by. Black and brown people falling ill to COVID-19 and dying in greater numbers than white people, pointing toward the familiar racial gaps of income and access to health care. Queer and trans folks at danger from the new conservative majority on the Supreme Court. Reproductive rights at danger from the new conservative majority on the Supreme Court. White supremacists taking to the streets all across the country. Women, especially mothers, bearing the greater burden of job loss from shutdowns and the greater burden of childcare and educating children at home. Police killings of black and brown lives. Murders of trans women of color. Money trumping everything. Climate change deniers, science deniers of all stripes, folks voting against their own self-interest because they've been sold a shiny promise. Hunger and food insecurity in the United States, in Minnesota, in Brown County. And of course, a president who has lied consistently about everything for 4 years, and journalists who are just now finally using words like false and falsely after years of softer, less honest euphemisms. So many reasons to be outraged, even if we're tired of being outraged, even if we are exhausted by our outrage. It feels like letting go of outrage is dangerous, premature. It might be that if we dare to let go of outrage, if we want anything ever to, it may be that we dare not let go of outrage if we want anything to ever change. We can't let them, whoever they are, see us go still, quiet, take a breath, lest they think they have won. Think that the violence and the inequalities and the destruction of our planet don't matter to us anymore. But I remember the story about the wind and the sun arguing over who is the more powerful. They decided to settle the argument by testing their powers on an unsuspecting person walking along below the sky. Whichever one can make their target remove their coat will be declared the most powerful. The wind goes first, thinking to easily blow the coat right off the person's back. Huffing and puffing like the big bad wolf, gusting like a blustery day in November, finally howling like a tornado. But the person just bends their head into the wind and wraps their coat more tightly around themselves with each new level of wind. Then the sun. The sun begins to shine gently like a spring morning, as brightly as a midsummer noon, finally blazing like an August afternoon. And the person lifts their face to the sky, unbuttons their coat, and finally removes it. We who want things different for our children, for our planet home, for our siblings of color, for GLBTQI neighbors and loved ones, cannot just smile warmly upon the people who regularly wage wars of economics, access, and power on our children, our planet, our siblings, our neighbors and loved ones, and expect those people to throw off their coats of power and greed, their armored cloaks of fear and hatred. We know it doesn't work that way. But we also know that blast after blast of unrelenting and unfocused outrage will cause those at whom we are outraged to pull their coats tighter and tighter and put their heads down to withstand our outraged outpouring of fact and logic. We've experienced this happening ourselves in the face of unrelenting outrage from others, And we've seen how our own outrage has this effect. So if making nice isn't going to be effective, and anger isn't going to be effective, then what? If outrage both wearies us and hardens the heart of those whose ways we seek to change, and premature, shallow, and easily misinterpreted gestures of reconciliation aren't equal to the needs of these times, what then is our strategy? Let's go back to the last leaf. If we're not, most of us, being called to go out into the cold and wet to risk our lives saving others, is there a place for us in O. Henry's story? What if what we are called to do in this moment, when we are outraged but weary of ourselves as outraged, is to paint leaves? To find one small part of what outrages us, a part that we have the skills or the imagination or the stomach or the stubbornness to match, and then paint the solution, no matter how unlikely. Even those people, at the sound of whose voice I immediately turn off the radio, even those people whose bumper stickers and flags elicit murmurs from me that alarm Louis, even the ones I am convinced and concerned have no soul and no objective other than amassing power, all of them, all of us would paint that last leaf for a friend or someone with whom we have any sort of connection, would give our hair to buy a watch fob for a beloved, as in O. Henry's more famous tale of sacrifice. But we need more than that. Our world desperately needs more than giving our last for someone we love. Last leaves, vestiges of health and dignity and self-sufficiency and equal protection under the law, are dangling all around us, ready to fall and take with them the lives of people we don't love and have never met and with whom we have no sort of connection other than common humanity. And we need whole artist colonies of painters to create innovative, equitable, sustainable, transformative solutions before the branches on the trees of our community, our country, our planet are truly and irreversibly bare. What leaf are you called to paint that would breathe life into the possibility of real and lasting reduction of harm? Or perhaps the leaf you are called to paint is not of reduction, but of regeneration, a good in society that is in danger of being lost that you can paint back to vitality. What paints and brushes are in your paint box? A keyboard or pen and paper for letters to the editor? Dollars for contributions to grassroots organizations doing the work they know their communities need and they best know how to do? The fortitude, when engaging in social media, to not rise to the bait of those who would further stoke outrage, whether you are in agreement or opposition to any given post or meme. To use your social media engagement in ways that amplify facts and stories of people working for change, not clickbait, not feel-good porn, but current stories from reputable sources that are complex and challenging rather than cute and sweet. Prayer may be in your paint box. Winter is here. Disease is moving through our global village, both COVID and more pervasive, deadlier, older than the virus, greed, hatred, white supremacy. It is time to paint our masterpiece at last. Amen. Our hymn is Love Will Guide Us. Words by Sally Rogers. Music traditional, arranged by Betty A. Wilder. Sally Hanson on piano. Before I extinguish our chalice, I'm going to ask my tech assistant to turn the camera so you can see what I'm seeing. I miss your beautiful faces, and I may need to post pictures of them in the future, but it's not a bad view. The words for extinguishing our chalice are in the order of service that I posted on Facebook a while back. Let's say them in unison. The flame has been doused. The fire of our community still burns. In this moment, we become beacons on the prairie, bearers of light and warmth until we gather again to rekindle our communal chalice. And now, since the struggle deepens, since evil abides and good does not yet prosper, let us gather what strength we have, what confidence and valor, that our small victories may end in triumph, and the world awaited be the world attained. Amen.